So imagine you're going to an oncologist, right? You've been feeling terrible for months.
Right, like something is just deeply wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they run the scans, they look at all the blood work, and they discover this massive, aggressive tumor.
Wow, okay, grim start, but go on.
Yeah, right. But instead of scheduling surgery or, I don't know, starting chemotherapy, the doctor walks into the room and he hands you a bottle of cherry-flavored cough syrup for your throat tickle.
Oh, jeez.
And he gives you some ibuprofen for the headache and just, sends you on your way.
You'd be furious. I mean, you'd call that catastrophic malpractice.
Totally. Because treating the superficial symptoms of a fatal disease while just entirely ignoring the root cause, it isn't just foolish, it's literally a death sentence.
Yeah, it's negligent.
Right. But according to the source material we are diving into today, that is precisely how humanity operates on a macro level.
I mean, it really is the ultimate diagnostic blind spot of the modern era,
For sure. Because we spend this massive amount of time, energy, and trillions of dollars in our modern world just trying to treat the symptoms.
Right, the surface level stuff.
Yeah, we pour resources into fighting poverty, combating crime, treating the epidemic of anxiety, and just trying to heal all this toxic political division. And I mean, don't get me wrong, we absolutely should be doing those things.
Oh, definitely. They're real problems.
But the argument we're unpacking today is that by only focusing on those external societal symptoms, we are essentially putting bandages on a patient who has a fatal internal spiritual disease.
And we keep throwing better technology, more sophisticated education, and higher standards of living at the human condition.
Yeah.
And then we just stand around collectively wondering why the fever won't break.
Right.
I mean, we're stunned when the 20th century, which is arguably our most educated century, produces industrialized warfare. But it's because the infection is deep inside the body. It's completely untouched by our external advancements.
Which brings us to the actual mission for today's deep dive. We are looking at a profoundly heavy, but honestly incredibly illuminating book by Rian Engelbrecht called The Savagery of the Inner Beast.
The fallen soul and the triumph of Christ's new creation.
Yes, exactly. And our goal today is to trace what the author calls the inner beast. We're going to look at its origins, supposedly back in the Garden of Eden, and then we're going to hold up some ancient biblical figures as x-rays of the human soul to see how this beast operates.
Which is such a fascinating approach.
It really is. And from there, we'll look at how it has evolved into what the author terms civilized savagery, things that feel very normal to us, like consumerism and our digital lives on social media.
Right, the stuff we interact with every single day.
Yeah. And then finally, we'll look at what the text claims is the only actual cure for this disease.
And, the value of this text, regardless of your personal theological background, even if you're just listening to this from a purely secular standpoint, is its psychological and historical piercing power.
Yeah, we're just unpacking the author's ideas here, but they are incredibly thought-provoking for anyone.
Totally. Because it offers a framework for why history is essentially a loop. Why do we keep building empires that ultimately just collapse under the weight of their own corruption?
Right. Why does every generation struggle with the exact same core issues of greed and envy and power?
Exactly. And the source argues that the line separating good and evil doesn't run between geographical borders, and it certainly doesn't run between political parties.
Where does it run?
It runs straight through the center of every single human heart.
Man, that's heavy. So I guess we have to start where the diagnosis begins, which means rewinding the clock to before the disease entered the patient.
Right, back to the beginning.
Yeah, before what theology calls the fall. The text is very clear that humanity did not begin as this savage, grasping creature clawing its way through a hostile existence, right?
No, not at all.
In Eden, human faculties, the mind, the heart, the will, they were supposedly perfectly ordered. But I want to pause there for a second because perfectly ordered can sound like a really boring, robotic existence to modern ears.
Yeah, like you're just programmed to be good.
Right. What does perfectly ordered actually mean in the context of this book?
Well, it's a vital baseline to establish because you really can't understand the tragedy of the disease if you don't understand the beauty of the original health.
Okay, that makes sense.
So think of the human soul in this pre-fall state like a masterfully tuned instrument. The strings aren't fighting each other, right? They're calibrated to produce resonance.
Oh, I like that imagery.
Yeah, the text paints this picture where the first breath the first human drew wasn't merely biological. It was the initiation of an unbroken communion with the Creator.
Wow.
And in that state, every appetite served a legitimate, beautiful purpose. Desire wasn't something you had to suppress, Desire was a vehicle that naturally served love.
So you're saying there was no internal friction? Like, when I want a fourth slice of pizza, but I know I shouldn't have it, my will and my appetite are essentially at war.
Right. The modern human condition.
Exactly. So in this original state, that war just doesn't exist.
Exactly. The human soul wasn't divided against itself because it was perfectly aligned with its source. And this brings up a massive philosophical point the author makes.
Okay.
Humanity was never designed for self-government.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. We were designed to flourish under divine government.
Yeah.
Freedom, at least in the Edenic sense, wasn't the ability to do whatever you want without consequence.
Which is how we define it today, right?
Yeah.
Just leave me alone to do my thing.
Right. But in Eden, freedom was the ability to be exactly what you were created to be.
Yeah.
Like, think about a fish. A fish is entirely free when it is submerged in water.
Okay.
If the fish decides it wants the freedom to live on the beach, it doesn't find liberation. It finds suffocation.
Okay. Here is where I want to push back on the premise a little bit, because this is where the author introduces this language of the beast.
Right, the inner beast.
Yeah. The narrative of Eden goes that the serpent enters the garden, but the serpent doesn't tempt them to commit a horrific atrocity.
No, it's very subtle.
He doesn't say, hey, you should murder each other, or like, let's burn down the garden. The temptation is purely the seduction of autonomy.
The line is, you shall be like God.
Exactly. But I struggle with the leap the author makes here. Why use such a violent, predatory, dark word-like beast for a desire for self-rule? I mean, isn't independence just growing up? Isn't wanting to be in charge of your own life the most natural human instinct in the world?
Well, it is the most natural human instinct in the fallen world.
Yeah.
But to understand why the author uses the term beast, we have to look at the mechanics of what actually happens when that tether to the creator is cut.
Okay, walk me through that.
The soul was designed fundamentally to reflect God, to receive love and then reflect it outward. When you sever that connection through the demand for autonomy, the soul doesn't suddenly become this neutral, objective, free-floating entity.
It doesn't just chill in a state of independence.
No, it suffers a structural collapse. The author relies heavily here on an ancient concept popularized by Augustine of Hippo, incurvatus in se.
Oh, I've actually seen that phrase before. It translates to the heart curved inward upon itself.
Yes, and it is a terrifyingly accurate psychological diagnosis. When the soul is severed from the life giver, it doesn't expand into ultimate freedom. It shrinks. It curves inward.
It collapses on itself.
Exactly. Instead of looking upward in worship and outward in love, it becomes fixated entirely on itself. And here is the terrifying mechanical reality the text insists upon.
I'm ready.
The human soul must have a master. It is structurally incapable of true, neutral independence. It is a throne that cannot remain empty.
So if God gets off the throne, the human doesn't just sit on it peacefully.
No, because the human isn't equipped to handle the weight of that throne. When God is removed, something else instantly rushes in to fill the vacuum.
Like what?
Well, pride becomes the king, or fear takes the throne, or biological appetite, or, the desperate need for validation. And those new kings, they are absolute tyrants.
Man, so you're swapping one ruler for a much worse one.
Precisely. When the autonomous self insists on ruling, it inevitably begins to devour. It consumes resources, it consumes relationships, it consumes the environment, all to feed its own infinite inward curving void.
And that is why it is a beast.
Right. The beast doesn't begin with a roar of violence. It begins with the quiet, dignified demand for lordship. It says, I will be my own God. And the fallout of that impossible demand is the savagery we see in the world.
That reframes the entire concept of temptation for me. It makes it sound much less like, a cartoon devil on your shoulder pitching bad ideas.
Right, the guy with the pitchfork.
Yeah, and much more like an internal structural failure, which aligns perfectly with how the author breaks down the actual anatomy of how this beast grows.
The gestation process.
Exactly. He pulls from the book of James in the New Testament, specifically chapter 1, I think, and maps out what is essentially the gestation process of evil.
And James is incredibly useful here because he operates almost like an ancient psychologist of the soul. He completely rejects the idea that temptation is just this overwhelming external force that ambushes an innocent victim.
Right. It's not just happening to you.
Exactly. He writes that a person is tempted when they are lured and enticed by their own desire. The external bait only works because the internal beast is already hungry for it.
The text uses reproductive language, which is deeply unsettling when you really think about it.
It really is.
It says desire conceives, and then it gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. So the soul literally becomes a womb.
It's a chilling metaphor because it emphasizes that this is a process. The beast is not born fully matured. Sin has a lineage. The author breaks down the family tree, so to speak.
Let's hear it.
So, the father is deception. The lie that this thing will make you happy or secure. The mother is disordered desire. The inward curving appetite we talked about.
Okay, so father is deception, mother is disordered desire.
Right. And when those two meet in the mind and are entertained, they conceive an action. And the child that is born is sin.
So the beast starts by whispering. It's an internal negotiation. You tell yourself, just this once. Or, you deserve this.
Or they wronged you first, so you're totally justified.
Right. We essentially incubate the beast with our own rationalizations.
We feed it. And the scariest part of a gestation process is that it happens in the dark, entirely hidden from the outside world.
Oh, wow, yeah.
You can be incubating resentment, greed, or lust for months or even years, and you look completely normal to everyone around you.
Mm.
Until the moment the beast is finally born into the physical world through an action.
And that hidden incubation brings us to the next major pillar of this book. The author refuses to let this remain an abstract philosophical theory. He says the beast takes on specific human faces.
Real historical people.
Yeah, he uses biblical characters not as historical trivia, but as literal x-rays of the human condition. They are mirrors reflecting the different ways the inward curved heart manifests.
And the very first mirror we are forced to look into is Cain.
The beast of resentment.
Cain is the archetypal case study of how that gestation process we just talked about actually works in real time.
Uh-huh.
I mean, we all know the shorthand, right? Cain kills his brother Abel. It's the first murder.
Right, Sunday school basic.
But the text forces us to look at where the murder actually began. It didn't start in the field with a rock or a club. It started at the altar of worship.
That is such a crucial detail. Cain wasn't a pagan warlord. He was a worshiper. He was bringing an offering to God. But God accepts Abel's offering and rejects Cain's. Now, people have debated for millennia why the offering was rejected. Was it the type of sacrifice or the attitude of his heart?
Tons of theories on that.
But the author's focus is entirely on Cain's reaction to the rejection.
Because the reaction reveals the inward curve. Cain wanted the divine blessing, he wanted the approval, but he wanted it on his own terms.
He wanted to control it.
Exactly. When the universe didn't validate him the way he felt he deserved, he had a choice. A healthy, outwardly oriented soul would look inward, ask for wisdom, and adjust. But the beast doesn't self-reflect. The beast compares.
Oh, right.
Cain looks sideways at his brother.
And that sideways glance is the conception of the beast. It's comparison breeding jealousy. But jealousy is just a feeling, It has to harden into something worse to get to murder.
It hardens into grievance. Deep, toxic resentment. Cain decides that Abel's success is actually an injustice against Cain.
Like Abel stole something from him.
Yes. And what is so profound in this narrative is that God intervenes during the incubation period.
Before any violence happens.
Right. God speaks to Cain and gives him a stark medical warning. He says, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is for you, but you must rule over it.
Crouching at the door. It paints sin as a predator, like a leopard in the tall grass.
It's a terrifying image.
And what's terrifying about a crouching predator is its patience. It isn't frantic. It just waits for you to step outside. It waits for you to feed it.
The beast is infinitely patient. It'll let you nurse a grudge for a decade if necessary. Cain is told he has the agency to master it, to shut the door.
But he doesn't.
No, he refuses.
Yeah.
He nurses the grievance. He feeds the jealousy. And so the beast masters him, and resentment demands blood.
And the author uses this to show what exactly?
That violence, whether it's physical murder, verbal abuse, or character assassination, is almost never spontaneous. It is the end result of a heart that has been curved inward, secretly incubating a grievance until it destroys.
That translates so heavily to modern outrage and grievance culture, doesn't it? If I decide someone else's blessing or privilege is a direct theft from me, I am essentially building an altar to the beast of resentment.
And you will eventually find a field to strike them down in, whether literally or metaphorically.
Wow. Okay, let's move forward in the timeline to a different X-ray, a much more subtle one, in my opinion. King Saul.
The beast of insecurity.
Right. Now, this one fascinates me because when we first meet Saul in the historical narrative, he doesn't look like a tyrant.
No, he looked pretty modest.
The people want a king. The prophet Samuel identifies Saul, and when it's time to anoint him, they literally can't find him. He is hiding in the baggage. On the surface, that looks like extreme humility.
It looks like it, yes. But the author draws a razor-sharp distinction here that is vital for anyone in any kind of leadership, or really just anyone navigating human relationships.
What's the distinction?
There is a profound difference between humility and insecurity.
Okay, unpack that for me.
They might look similar behaviorally in a given moment, but their internal architectures are complete opposites. Humility is the state of forgetting yourself because you are so entirely focused on God and others. You aren't thinking about your status.
You're just outwardly focused.
Right. Insecurity, however, is a manifestation of the inward curve. The insecure person is completely consumed with themselves. They are paralyzed by the fear of how they're perceived, the fear of failure, the fear of losing whatever little status they possess.
So Saul hiding the baggage wasn't him saying, I am unworthy of this great honor because God is so great. It was him saying, I am terrified of the expectations of all these people. It was a fear of man.
Precisely. His identity was not anchored in his relationship with the divine. It was entirely dependent on external validation. And when your foundation is built on human approval, you are inherently fragile.
Right, because opinions change constantly.
Exactly. You are always one bad day away from an existential crisis.
Which brings us to the ultimate stress test for Saul's fragile ego, a teenager named David.
The giant killer.
Right, young, charismatic, giant-killing, music-playing David. Now let's play this out rationally. Saul is the king. David is his citizen, his soldier. When David defeats Goliath, it is a massive victory for Saul's kingdom.
A huge win.
If Saul had a secure, outwardly oriented heart, David's success would be a joy. It's a win for the team. Saul should be thrilled.
He should be. But let's look at how the beast of insecurity operates. To the deeply insecure heart, another person's success is never a shared victory, because the insecure heart operates on a mythology of scarcity.
Scarcity of what? Money?
No, scarcity of worth. It believes that honor, love, and respect are a zero-sum game. There is only a finite pie of approval in the universe, and if David just took a massive slice, that means there is less for Saul.
Ah, so someone else's promotion is literally interpreted as a personal demotion.
Yes. David becomes a walking mirror reflecting Saul's own inadequacy. The women start singing that song. Saul has struck down his thousands and David his 10,000s.
Oh man, that song.
That song is the spark that detonates the beast. Saul becomes obsessed with replacement. The text tracks his descent from a king called to shepherd a nation into a paranoid, spiraling tyrant who spends his state resources hunting down his most loyal, effective servant in the wilderness.
It's tragic.
The beast of insecurity will burn down its own kingdom, destroy its own family, and sabotage its own legacy, all to protect a fundamentally fragile sense of self.
It makes you wonder how many toxic work environments, fractured families, or broken friendships are just the fallout of someone operating under the beast of insecurity.
Oh, countless.
Like when a boss undermines a talented employee or a parent competes with their own child, it's basically Saul throwing the spear at David.
It is the exact same ancient mechanism playing out in modern clothes.
Okay, as exhausting as Saul is, the next face we have to look at is frankly terrifying because it's the most camouflaged. Judas Iscariot.
The beast of hidden legions.
Yeah, and as I was reading this section, I couldn't stop thinking about a house I saw once that had been destroyed by termites.
Termites, walk me through that.
Well, from the outside, the house looked incredible. The paint was fresh, the roof was solid, the landscaping was pristine. If you just drove by, you'd think it was the most secure structure on the block.
Right, totally a normal house.
But inside the walls, in the foundational beams, these tiny, invisible insects were quietly eating the wood. They were hollowing it out. The owners had no idea until one day, under a moderate amount of stress, maybe a storm or just time, the entire structure just collapsed inward.
Wow.
And the sudden collapse was shocking to the neighbors, but the reality is the destruction was happening silently for years. Judas is the termite in the foundation.
That is a phenomenal analogy because it captures the central horror of Judas's character arc. The author points out that Judas is the most terrifying manifestation of the inward curving beast because he looked identical to a faithful disciple.
He blended right in.
He really did. He wasn't a Pharisee plotting openly against Jesus. He wasn't a Roman soldier holding a spear. He was inside the inner circle. He went on the missionary journeys. He preached the coming of the kingdom.
He even healed the sick, right?
Yes, he healed the sick. He shared intimate meals with the Messiah.
And his camouflage was flawless. I mean, think about the Last Supper. Jesus sits there and plainly says, one of you is going to betray me.
Right.
If Judas had been acting shifty, or if everyone knew he was a fraud, all 11 heads would have immediately swiveled to stare at Judas. But they didn't.
They were completely clueless.
They were so confused, they started asking, is it I, Lord? They doubted their own hearts before they doubted Judas.
Which proves that the beast can master the language and the aesthetics of virtue perfectly. But the termites were already at work.
Yeah.
The author highlights a crucial detail from the Gospel of John. Judas was the treasurer for the group, and he was secretly skimming from the money bag.
Just a little bit at a time.
Exactly. It was a tiny hidden allegiance to his own appetite. He allowed a microscopic inward curve to exist while performing outward devotion.
And that leads to one of the most chilling scenes in the text. Jesus is in Bethany, and Mary takes this incredibly expensive flask of pure nard perfume and pours it over Jesus' feet.
It's this extravagant, beautiful act of worship.
And Judas is the one who speaks up to object. But notice how he objects. He doesn't say, hey, I wanted to steal that.
No, that would give him away.
He says, why wasn't this ointment sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor?
He weaponizes social justice.
Exactly.
He uses the rhetoric of righteousness and compassion as a smokescreen for his own greed. The text explicitly notes he didn't care about the poor. He cared about the money box.
Wow.
This is where the beast reaches its most sophisticated evolution. It learns to wear the mask of altruism. It convinces the host that they are actually the hero of the story.
It's hypocrisy weaponized. Proximity to holiness does not equal inward transformation.
That's a great way to put it.
You can literally walk with Jesus, watch him raise the dead, hear the Sermon on the Mount with your own ears, and still have a heart so aggressively curved inward that you would sell the Son of God for the price of a slave.
It's sobering.
Judas proves that the beast is perfectly comfortable sitting in the front pew of the church, singing the loudest, as long as it gets to stay on the throne of the heart.
And that is the ultimate warning of the Judas narrative. The collapse wasn't sudden. Taking the 30 pieces of silver wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. It was the inevitable structural failure of a house that had been hollowed out by hundreds of tiny hidden compromises over 3 years.
Okay, this is a heavy pivot, but this is exactly where the author broadens the scope, and it's brilliant. Because up to this point, a listener could easily compartmentalize.
Oh, absolutely.
They could say, wow, Cain was awful, Saul was a mess, Judas is a tragedy, good thing I'm not murdering my brother or betraying the Messiah. We distance ourselves from the ancient text.
It's a defense mechanism. We prefer the beast to be historical.
But the author absolutely refuses to let us off the hook. He asks a devastating question. What happens when you take this autonomous, inward-curving soul, this beast, and you multiply it by 8 billion?
You don't just get individual moments of sin.
No. You get systems. You get entire cultures, economies, and infrastructures built to accommodate and feed the beast. The author calls this civilized savagery.
It's the beast wearing a suit and tie.
Right. So let's examine how this ancient disease manifests in our modern everyday lives. Let's start with where we spend our money. Consumerism, the beast that never says enough.
This is where the theological diagnosis becomes a socioeconomic critique. Unlike the violence of Cain or the betrayal of Judas, consumerism isn't a sin we hide in the shadows.
No, it's encouraged.
It is the defining liturgy of our culture. It is socially celebrated, heavily incentivized, and marketed to us constantly as the ultimate expression of freedom.
Yeah.
But the author draws a direct, unbroken line from the modern shopping mall back to the serpent in Eden.
How so? The serpent was about autonomy. Consumerism is about buying stuff. Where is the link?
The link is the mechanism of the lie. What was the core of the serpent's pitch to Adam and Eve? It was a declaration of lack.
Oh, right.
You are missing something. God is holding out on you. You need this specific fruit to finally be complete, to have your eyes open. Modern advertising and consumerism preach the exact same gospel.
Man, that's true.
The entire industry is predicated on manufacturing discontent. It looks at a perfectly healthy, functioning human and whispers, you are inadequate.
Mm-hmm.
But if you just purchase this car, this diet plan, this specific brand of clothing, you will finally achieve significance. You will be complete.
So the beast survives by convincing us that the infinite void inside of us can be filled with finite created things.
Yes. The author leans on the philosopher Blaise Pascal here, who famously observed that there is an infinite abyss in the human heart that can only be filled by an infinite and immutable object, namely God.
Right.
Consumerism is the tragic, exhausting attempt to fill an infinite hole with a million finite pebbles.
And it creates a cycle. The author breaks down the anatomy of a purchase, and it's unsettlingly accurate. It starts with the loss of gratitude. You stop looking at what you have, and you look at what you don't.
Which breeds discontent.
Right.
Discontent hardens into covetousness. You finally acquire the item, you click buy now. And for about 10 minutes, or maybe a day, you get a genuine dopamine hit. You feel a temporary satisfaction.
A high of the new thing.
Exactly. But then the novelty wears off, the item becomes normal, and the emptiness comes rushing back, usually stronger than before.
Because the spiritual law remains. The beast never says, it is enough. It only knows the word more.
Yeah.
And this is why it's savage. Because to feed that endless appetite, we will strip mine the planet, exploit cheap labor across the globe, and plunge ourselves into crushing debt, all to chase a mirage of completion that fades the moment we touch it. Consumerism is the beast commodifying the human search for meaning.
Let's pivot from our wallets to our attention spans. If consumerism is how the beast uses our money, social media is how it uses our vanity. The author calls this the beast that hungers for recognition.
This one hits close to home for a lot of people. Very close. Now, to be fair to the text, and we should be clear here, we're just unpacking the author's viewpoint. The author is careful to state that technology itself, like the silicon, the code, the smartphone, is morally neutral. A smartphone isn't inherently evil.
Right, the tool isn't the beast. But the author argues that the algorithms powering these platforms are explicitly designed to tap into and pour gasoline on the most ancient vulnerabilities of the fallen soul.
Specifically what?
Specifically pride, envy, and the desperate inward-curving craving for human validation.
The text makes a connection here that genuinely blew my mind. It links our digital ecosystem directly to the Tower of Babel in the Book of Genesis.
It's a profound parallel. At Babel, the driving motivation wasn't simply to build a tall building. The scripture records the people saying, "Let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves."
Let us make a name for ourselves.
It was a monument to collective human pride, a desperate attempt at self-creation and self-glorification, completely independent of God. And the author argues that social media platforms operate as individualized towers of Babel.
We're all carrying little towers of Babel in our pockets, because what are we doing on these apps? We're trying to make a name for ourselves.
Exactly.
The beast turns personhood, which is supposed to be a sacred, quiet reality lived before God, into a performance. Your identity is no longer who you are. It's a brand you have to constantly manage, curate, and optimize for an audience.
And think about the sheer psychological exhaustion of that. You are functioning as the CEO, the PR department, and the product of your own life.
All at once.
And the fuel for this entire engine is comparison. When your sense of worth is tied to external metrics, likes, followers, retweets, you are forced to constantly measure your curated highlight reel against everyone else's curated highlight reels.
Which guarantees misery. Because, as the author points out, this constant comparison only breeds one of two things, and both of them feed the inward curve.
Let's hear them.
If you look at someone else's feed and decide you are doing better than they are, you breed pride and arrogance. If you look and decide they are doing better than you breed envy and despair.
Right, there's no winning.
There is no biological or spiritual mechanism where scrolling through a highly edited feed of other people's lives breeds genuine gratitude or deep spiritual peace.
Sorry, to use your word, that is the friction right there. The beast thrives in the extremes of pride and envy. And meanwhile, in the pursuit of maintaining the digital avatar, the authentic self is starved.
You lose yourself.
The person you actually are, sitting alone in a room, feels increasingly alien because you've spent all your energy maintaining the projection.
It's a willing fragmentation of the soul. Okay, let's look at the third modern manifestation. This one is perhaps the most tragic because it's rooted in deep suffering.
Right, escapism.
The author addresses drug culture and broader escapism, calling it the beast that escapes reality.
This section shifts the tone from critique to deep lament, because the author recognizes that the world is genuinely agonizing. We are living in the fallout of the fall. Bodies get sick, hearts get broken, betrayal happens, trauma is real.
Yeah, life is hard.
And the soul, curved inward and separated from the ultimate comforter, cannot bear the weight of that pain. It demands an anesthetic.
The parallel he draws here goes straight back to the garden again. After Adam and Eve eat the fruit, what is their immediate reaction when they hear God walking in the garden?
They hide.
They hide. They sew fig leaves together and they hide behind the trees. And the author makes the observation that modern escapism, whether it's chemical addiction, alcoholism, or even softer forms like binge-watching television for 12 hours straight to avoid thinking it is all just a modern version of hiding behind the trees.
We are still terrified, we are still naked, and we are still hiding. We're just using different foliage. We use pharmacology or digital numbing to silence the conscience and block out the reality of our pain.
But the tragedy, as the author points out, is that the beast of escapism is a liar. It promises freedom from the pain, but it never actually delivers freedom. It just transfers the deed of your life to a new warden.
That's the brutal reality of addiction. It promises a sanctuary, but it builds a cage. It merely changes your prison from a psychological one to a neurological or chemical one.
It just numbs it.
It never heals the underlying wound. It simply postpones the pain. And the cost of that postponement is the gradual erosion of the self. And when the anesthetic inevitably wears off, the soul is forced to awaken to a reality that is now functionally worse than before the escape began.
Because the beast always hides, always numbs, and ultimately always isolates.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's take a breath because we have laid out a deeply bleak diagnosis. If the text is right, the beast isn't just a historical boogeyman. It is woven into our economic systems, our communication technologies, our coping mechanisms, and the deepest architecture of our own hearts.
It's everywhere.
And the author makes a compelling point that history proves we cannot educate or engineer our way out of this. As we said at the beginning, the 20th century saw the greatest explosion of scientific and educational advancement in human history, and we used it to drop atomic bombs and build concentration camps.
Education just made the beast more efficient.
Right. So if civilization cannot cure us, and trying harder just feeds the pride of the beast, what is the biblical cure? We need a radical intervention.
We do. And this is the pivot in the book where the author moves from this heavy diagnosis to the ultimate hope. The biblical solution is uncompromising, and it is entirely countercultural.
Okay, what is it?
The solution is not behavior modification. You cannot tame the inward curved heart. You cannot put a leash on the beast, train it to be polite, and call it Christianity.
So it's not just trying to be a better person.
No. The beast cannot be reformed. The beast must die.
So we aren't talking about self-improvement. We're talking about an execution.
A complete demolition and reconstruction. The theological term for this is regeneration. The author anchors this in the Old Testament prophet Ezekiel, specifically chapter 36.
I remember that passage.
In that text, God doesn't say, I'm going to give you a better rule book, or I'm going to teach you better coping mechanisms. God says, I will give you a new heart, and a new spirit I will put within you, and I will remove the heart of stone from your flesh and give you a heart of flesh.
It's basically a spiritual heart transplant.
Exactly. It is a fundamentally new operating system. This is what Jesus was talking about in his famous conversation with Nicodemus when he said, you must be born again.
Which blew Nicodemus's mind.
Right, because it's a shocking statement to a highly educated, moral, religious leader. Jesus is essentially saying, your current inward curved life, no matter how much you polish the exterior, is structurally doomed. The old disease has to be eradicated by the introduction of an entirely new divine life.
And the one who initiates this new life, the ultimate counter to the beast, is Christ. I loved the section where the author just lays out these rapid-fire contrasts between the nature of the beast and the nature of Jesus.
The great section.
Because if the beast is the ultimate expression of the fall, Christ is the ultimate expression of new creation.
The contrasts are breathtaking when you view them side by side. Let's walk through the architecture of the two natures. We said the beast is fundamentally autonomous.
Right.
It demands the throne and says, I will be my own master.
Right.
Look at Christ. In his earthly life, he possesses ultimate power, yet he's perfectly, willingly submitted to the Father. In the Garden of Gethsemane, facing unimaginable agony, his core operating principle is, not my will, but yours be done.
Wow.
It is the exact reversal of the seduction of Eden.
And think about how they interact with the world. The beast exists to take and consume. We see that in consumerism and exploitation and how people use each other in relationships. The beast treats others as fuel.
Right.
But Christ, described in Revelation as the Lamb of God, exists to give. He doesn't consume humanity. He offers himself to be consumed, breaking his own body for the life of the world.
Furthermore, where the beast inherently enslaves, whether through literal systemic chains or the invisible chains of addiction, debt, and the need for approval, Christ is the great liberator.
Setting the captives free.
Exactly. He operates to set the captives free, breaking the cycle of the inward curve and restoring the soul's ability to look upward and outward.
You know, my favorite contrast in the whole book is about humanization.
Oh, that part is so good.
The author states that the beast, by its very nature, dehumanizes. It reduces people to statistics, to political obstacles, to target demographics, or just to objects of gratification.
It flattens them out.
Yes, but Christ constantly rehumanizes. He looks at the leper who has been cast out and reduced to a disease, and he touches him, restoring his humanity.
He looks at the woman caught in adultery, reduced by the mob to an object of judgment, and he speaks directly to her dignity.
Exactly. The beast is a parasite on God's creation, seeking to devour the image of God in people. Christ is the restorer, polishing the mirror of the soul so it can reflect the Creator once again.
Which culminates in the final triumphant vision of the book. The author turns to the book of Revelation to insist that human history does not end in a dystopian victory for the beast.
Thank goodness.
History doesn't end with Babylon. It ends with the New Jerusalem. But it's vital to understand what that actually means. The final victory of God isn't just the spectacular destruction of evil. It's not a cosmic wiping of the slate.
Right. It's not just God throwing his hands up, burning down the house, and starting over in a sterile white room.
No, it is the total glorious restoration of the original design. The promise of the new creation is that the human faculties, mind, heart, and will finally be permanently realigned with God.
The inward curve will be straightened.
Yes. The image of God, battered and fractured by millennia of civilized savagery, will be completely healed, reflecting the life-giver perfectly. It is the return to Eden, but elevated. It is humanity finally becoming what we were always meant to be.
What an absolute journey this text is. I mean, we started in the perfect harmony of Eden, watched the soul fracture and curve inward through the demand for autonomy.
We covered a lot of ground.
We did. We looked into the terrifying mirrors of Cain's resentment, Saul's insecurity, and Judas's hidden hypocritical compromise. We traced how those ancient seeds blossomed into the civilized savagery of our modern world, how consumerism commodifies our souls, how social media weaponizes our vanity, and how escapism builds us new prisons.
And finally, we arrived at the cure.
Right, the only viable cure, the death of the old self and the regeneration of the heart through Christ, the ultimate restorer.
It really forces a deeply personal reckoning. The most dangerous thing a reader can do with this book is agree with its diagnosis of society while ignoring its diagnosis of themselves.
Oh, that's a great point.
If you finish this material and think, wow, the culture is really sick, the politicians are beasts, the corporations are savage, you have missed the entire point.
It's too easy to point fingers.
Recognizing the inward curve within your own heart, identifying your own personal altars to the beast, is the agonizing but absolute prerequisite for grace. The great physician cannot heal a patient who adamantly denies they are sick.
I think that is the perfect place to land. And I want to leave you, our listener, with a final provocative thought to carry with you this week. It builds on that incredible statement the author made. The beast always dehumanizes, because God always humanizes.
That's a powerful quote.
It really is. If the beast's ultimate agenda is to obscure, distort, and destroy the image of God and humanity, I want you to think about the mundane moments of your everyday life. Not the dramatic, obvious sins, but the subtle ones. Think about what we brush off as normal irritation.
The stuff we justify every day.
Yeah, exactly. Think about when you are venting at a nameless stranger in traffic, reducing their entire existence to an obstacle in your path. Think about when you interact with someone online and you flatten their complex humanity into a simple two-dimensional political label because it makes it so much easier to despise them.
Wow, yeah.
Or think about interacting with a cashier or a barista and treating them merely as a transactional machine meant to dispense your coffee rather than a breathing soul bearing the fingerprints of the divine. How many of those tiny invisible moments are actually us yielding the throne to the beast? How often are we participating in the subtle savagery of dehumanization?
It's a sobering question.
So tomorrow, when you inevitably encounter someone who frustrates you, inconveniences you, or fundamentally disagrees with you, pause the inward curve for just a second. Ask yourself, whose nature am I reflecting right now, and whose image am I refusing to see in them?
That's something to think about.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.